Hey there, welcome to episode 172 of the Let's Innovate for Vegas audio program. I am your host, Managing Director of the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, Dan Hugo. We are recording this at 2:31 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time here in Greater Vegas on Tuesday, June 2nd, 2026. Wow, time is flying. If you are not familiar, that conjured other things on my to-do list. Hopefully you've heard of the Innovate for Vegas Foundation by now. If you have not, or if you're unfamiliar with this audio program, Let's Innovate for Vegas, here's the quick rundown. Innovate for Vegas Foundation is a Nevada nonprofit corporation, a 501c3 public charity. We were formed in June of 2022, a reboot or reformation of the, Code for Vegas organization, which is, I can never remember the exact years. It started and then sort of shut down for a while. But it was like a decade ago, like call it 2012, 2013, somewhere in there. The Code for Vegas organization was part of Code for America. I think it may have been just before the Brigade Network was formalized. I came on the scene right towards the tail end, if you like. So, but Code for Vegas was integral in building up the open data platform, I guess. I think it moved over to ArcGIS afterwards. But so integrating with the city of Las Vegas and some other folks around town, so to speak, to get civic volunteers to help out with implementing civic-focused technology, civic innovation, if you like. The open data platform was the big thing. So, get some water here. So, the civic innovation culture in the Greater Vegas area was born, and then it shut down for a while when the two co-captains departed the Vegas area. And the downtown project was really taking off, so it's sort of a back burner, shut down. Then, 2022, we decided to reboot it. Code for Vegas Foundation, a standalone, independent, nonprofit organization, received our 501c3 determination. Then the Brigade program was sunsetting, and we changed our name to the Innovate for Vegas Foundation to coincide with some of the branding of Greater Vegas. So you have the International Innovation Center, downtown Vegas, where we used to have our hackathon meetups. There's an entire innovation district. The city of Las Vegas calls itself the Global Innovation Hub, rivaling Silicon Valley. Innovation is a good term to use. So Innovate for Vegas. It also broadens the scope. We're not focused only on code. You will sometimes hear civic tech. I prefer to think of it as civic innovation. So I'm starting to use that term more generally. Innovation can take many forms. Code sort of sets up a few assumptions, but if you want to innovate, you can do a lot of things that don't involve code even. So moving from Code for Vegas to Innovate for Vegas, it was easier than saying it. It basically sends the message that more people are welcome. We did get the I'm not a coder, so am I not welcome here kind of thing. It's an odd question, but a legitimate one. So Innovate for Vegas Foundation. We're coming up on the end of our fourth year, which you could have determined with a little bit of math, but yes. So June 30th will be the end of our fourth fiscal year. We'll kick off our fifth year. We have a few things to do in the next couple of weeks. Hopefully we'll seat a few new board members, and hopefully we'll talk about ideas to get out of the civic volunteer winter, which I've talked about before, so we won't harp on that here. But today we are going to talk about civic co-creation. Civic co-creation, that is probably co-creation with civic innovation in mind as pursued by civic volunteers, a lot of civics. Hopefully you remember that class from about 8th grade. And then the Let's Innovate for Vegas audio program, 172 episodes in. We've had a couple of interviews early on. Mostly this is a monologue. We should return to interviews at some point. It's been a monologue, an audio essay of sorts on our projects and initiatives, different challenges we'd like to solve, different aspects of those challenges, different ideas, and so on. But we'll get back to interviews and more conversations, I hope, about where things are headed. Especially if we do get a few extra board members, we can introduce everybody and see where that goes. Probably going to do video versions of those. So hopefully wherever you found this audio program, you're able to locate the episode description, which contains the show notes, including a brief summary, which I will read to you, and then the links for today's episode, the 2 usual homepage links. If you've heard this audio program before, we have 2 homepages, and then co-creation link on Wikipedia, so you have some idea if you've not heard of that before. We're not going to go into the subtleties and nuance of co-creation today. I've actually done that before, a previous episode, but here we're going to look at how civic co-creation would fit into our overall model of how we are functioning. Functioning with more people would be better, but we'll see. I'm not talking about board members. I'm talking about our population, our cohort of civic volunteers. That's something we'll touch on. I've talked about it before. On that note, the summary of today's episode, we have talked about co-creation before, as well as civic volunteerism and more recently civic innovation. Now we can talk about bringing these together in Greater Vegas during CityCamp Las Vegas and the Smarter Smart City Challenge, and perhaps all the time. I should write all of the time. All the time, I think, is sort of colloquial. Is that the right way to say that word? So it's a little more slangy, perhaps all the time. The links for today's episode, as I mentioned, the Innovate for Vegas Foundation has 2 homepages. I call it the activity page and then the foundation page. So Innovate for Vegas, spelled Innovate FOR Vegas, no space, .org for activities. That's the things we're working on. Those are the initiatives. Those are people who are part of the organization within the cohort and are sort of the GitHub team setup can be useful, so you can kind of see who's working on what, or who's focused in what areas and so on. So GitHub as a tool enables some of those things. The innovateforvegas.org website is hosted on GitHub in our Innovate for Vegas GitHub organization. So useful for some things. And where would you find repositories for various projects that are part of various initiatives? That's where to start. If you're not a fan of GitHub, well, this is the modern world. We use GitHub for more than just code, more than just source code management. So there it is. But the homepage is a regular website. And then the other side of the poker chip, as I like to say, Innovate for Vegas, same spelling, innovateforvegas.foundation. This is kind of our business website. Remember, we are a Nevada nonprofit corporation, board of directors, minutes of meetings, which are, a lot of this is presently in the Google Workspace that we have gratis as a nonprofit. Actually, Google for nonprofits is actually Google for 501c3s, so bear that in mind. Those are not always the same thing. Often they are not. So we have a lot of documents, meeting minutes, and our bylaws and other such things in our Google Workspace. So eventually we'll move all that stuff into the foundation GitHub so that it's publicly available for time immemorial. But yeah, just to make that, everything we do is public. There are very few non-public things, non-open source things, etc. So making that stuff easier to get to. And again, separate, 2 sides of the same poker chip, because not everyone is so interested in the bylaws and our 990 filings and our annual list update, which will be filed on June 30th, this month, that is, and so on and so on and so on. So 2 sides of the same, I know, coin. Poker chip is more Vegas-y. And a co-creation Wikipedia article. Again, co-creation has a few different levels or takes. I mean, co-creation is something that you can really make your own. So it's not like a hard and fast collection of rules. It's more like, this is kind of a few different ways to do it that people know of, but then you adapt it to your process, what you're trying to develop, who you want to reach out to in a co-creation workflow, I guess you could say. So it's usually a customer co-creation, but who are the customers? You may have different levels of customers, so that may work out better for different types of products and so on. So it's a good starting point, as is everything on Wikipedia. But if you are really interested in co-creation, you can, the best way to do it is to actually become involved in a co-creation process, maybe as a customer or user, consumer of a thing from a company or other entity that is driving the co-creation process, designing, building something. And then you can think about how that works. I always say, if you want an example of co-creation, go to someone's restaurants work, but if you go to someone's home and they prepare a meal and then they ask you, how is it? You are co-creating. It's intended to get a little chuckle, but that is essentially the deal, right? How is it? Tell me what you think, and then I'll adjust it if I need to. Because it's not shipping anywhere. You're home. You're you're literally in the kitchen, or just off. Anyway, okay, enough of that. Civic engineering, that's another week. Civic innovation and volunteerism, civic volunteerism. So civic innovation is a term that has recently joined the lexicon around here. It's not a new thing. It is something that in its lacking, as in the amount of civic innovation happening, inspired Smarter Smart City Challenge thinking at the beginning, Smarter Smart City Challenge thinking at the beginning of 2026. I think it was late January, in the midst of our Civic Volunteer Winter. So I've mentioned this before. We don't have a lot of participation or interest lately. This is not limited to Vegas in the Civic Volunteer universe. There are some places that were former brigades that have a sort of a larger cohort of people who have remained interested and engaged over the years. Vegas, because of the shutdown in around 2013-14 timeframe, kind of lost some momentum, and then there are a variety of other factors. The pandemic certainly didn't help anyone, so I call it the Civic Volunteer Winter. If you've heard of the AI winter, it's when things slow down and participation wanes and so on. So there are a few things we have to sort of reassemble. When we rebooted, we were getting a little bit of interest, but I think the whole notion of civic innovation, civic volunteerism, was very new and still is technically. So these challenges are real. It is not a new term, civic innovation or notion, but it is something, the civic innovation part, that absolutely needs more light shining on it. I wrote lighting shining on it. Our foundation has been built on the idea that people in a given locality, Greater Vegas, for example, will have some interest in addressing issues, closing gaps, improving the state of affairs in general for themselves and the people around them. And some of these people will be interested in volunteering their time to implement those ideas, occasionally with some innovation in the mix. Like, not everything has to be a brand new invention. Perhaps now is as good a time as any to remind you of our actual purpose statement. So this is the purpose statement we filed when we formed our nonprofit corporation. I think we put it in there on the Form 1023-EZ when we applied for our IRS determination, which we then received. I think it was October 2022, but those are retroactive. So we've been a nonprofit since we formed, essentially. So since day one, since we got this going again, I guess, to enable and encourage ideation, innovation, and implementation to make our communities better. It's right there on the tin, innovation, and all the other things. Now, it is entirely possible that people working directly within government, especially local government, or perhaps working closely with or in external agencies and vendors with the RFP, request for a proposal process, and getting winning ideas implemented and deployed, whether they're good or not. Maybe they sounded good and were cheap. The lowest bid wins. But there is a non-zero chance that eyes roll and heads shake when deployed solutions are mediocre or maybe miss the mark for the sake of cost concerns, which can sure seem like less money spent is simply money wasted. Yeah, lowest bid maybe didn't win at the end of the day. It didn't win for everybody. Suppose something a little bit more expensive and proactive than public comment periods were integrated into a design process. What would we call such a thing? It's hard to say. So, civic co-creation. As I've intimated, co-creation is already a thing, of course, with multiple levels or forms and various ways to adopt it in a form, or adapt it, I suppose. Adapt. Let me change that to adapt. Adapt it in a formal, and you can adopt it too, but adapt it into a formal design workflow. Online interactions have enabled many small companies to reach out to present and future customers to try out new games or applications. It's easier with software. These are so-called beta testers, for example. Sometimes larger companies with the infrastructure to manage a co-creation community might offer physical devices during trial periods to test out design ideas and potential changes to validate intended improvement. So yeah, once you start building actual things, hardware usually, whether it's tech or otherwise, I mean, you could be a tester for new bicycles. You have to get a piece of hardware and try it out and give feedback. So there's a little bit more to that. It's a little bit more budget constrained in some cases if you don't have the wherewithal to manage physical resources and so on, but we're sticking local. If we are already engaged in civic innovation with the intent to, let's select a few words at random and string them together, make our smart city smarter, we are already looking around, examining what is in place now to implement our innovative changes or perhaps innovative ideas for something new. Something new doesn't have to be a brand new invention. It could be better ways to use things, better ways to integrate, make things work together. Noticing something that might be improved a little bit over here that will affect something over there. It could be a lot of things. This is the upside of doing local innovation. You are there already. You're not in a cubicle somewhere. You're not in an office building a great distance away. You may walk by or drive by or otherwise encounter something on a daily basis and say, seems like somebody could fix that. Why don't we? Imagine for a moment there are others around who have had similar thoughts about problems being fixed or addressed by someone, and perhaps you are that someone. You should be, if you aren't. Include those others in a conversation about the ideas in progress. Hey, here's what we're working on. What do you think? I actually do that all the time. They may be able to tell you what is missing or the facets that you've overlooked or that you and your team have overlooked or didn't think of in general. More ideas often, especially the nice thing about that is not only do you have some context for this conversation, right? You may all be walking or driving by or riding on a bicycle by. You may have noticed the same things, but from different angles. So you can spend more time on that than trying to describe a problem where someone you're talking to has no idea what you're talking about. They're in another place. They're far away. I encountered this when I was attempting to talk to the people in Montreal, Canada, about our how the transit app was not totally addressing some of the needs of people making use of our transit system here, for example. And that was back when we were putting together our open transit initiative, which has been sitting idle like a bus that is out of service for far too long. I still think we could do a better job by talking to people. While, by the way, we could co-create with the bus drivers, the drivers of our transit vehicles, and the people who ride the bus, the people whose family members ride the bus, for examples. Obviously, the operational people. There's a lot of people. There are visitors to Vegas. There are people who live here. That's a different type of familiarity with our bus system, and so on. While our foundation has already made civic co-creation an element of our overall process, asking people making use of our public transit system for their thoughts on what is missing, it's almost like I thought of this already. or inconvenient or maybe completely broken about our using our transit system to get around. That's something that I've actually done. The people are here, and they will likely be here tomorrow, next month, and so on. Unless they're visiting Vegas, then they may never come back. And they might even be interested in testing out any implementations we come up with along those lines. Agile for Volunteers, our initiative and project management scheme based on Agile methodology, of course. Both of these, Agile for Volunteers and Agile in general, original Agile, the original recipe, both include input and feedback from the people who will make use of the outcomes of these efforts, the customers. In our case, the outcomes of civic volunteerism in action. So, yes, I have been at bus stops, in buses, traveling somewhere, and I talk to people. Hey, what do you think of this? The app that we have to use, and the bus drivers don't like it. The riders, they're kind of apathetic. They got to get to work. They're not thinking about user interfaces too much. But there are several things that when you actually ask them about it, they say, yeah, I guess that is kind of not leading questions where possible. But the opportunity to work, so if you sit in a cubicle all day working on something that affects other people, but you never talk to those other people, you never really know. And so that's something we have an opportunity to do here. And you have an opportunity to do it wherever, there's nothing magical about being in Vegas other than the 38 million visitors from last year and the 41 point something million the year before. So we have a lot of people coming through that we can actually engage when appropriate. How does our new transit application work for you as a visitor here? So you are new to the area, you want to get around, you have goals, you have a couple days to spend here. You don't want to spend time missing buses because the information was incorrect, and so on and so on. I could talk about this for hours. In fact, I have. So let's move on to the civic part. The Smarter Smart City Challenge idea emerged from pondering how much time and energy have been fueling the global innovation hub hype found in and near Greater Vegas. This is not to say that there are not those who are pursuing innovative startup ideas in various areas, from technology to medicine to sustainability to coffee shops and everywhere in between. Could be anything. Innovation takes many forms, as we discussed. It could be anything, but most of the time, the crank attached to this machinery is turned through a series of common steps, with pitches and a search for early funding, to finding people to work on the idea, to making a return on investment feasible, to pivots so that you can still make that money back, to all manner of interesting bumps and turns. Now, when I just described that, it sounds like I'm still talking about like a software startup. That is something that I've been sort of complaining about, is that the so-called startup community is often thinking about tech, and I prefer to think of a entrepreneurial innovation community that thinks about a lot of different types of entrepreneurialism and innovation, possibly together. So, and then when you think about the civic part, it's not always a software startup that can make a difference in a locality. Sometimes it's something much more simple. Sometimes it's something much more complicated. So you never know. So tackling problems, not looking at the world through a tech startup return on investment for venture capital firms or individuals. That lens is one lens, but hopefully there are others. There was a time when some big companies would encourage their employees to spend time on community-facing or personal projects, which could be community-facing, with Google being perhaps the most famous for their 20% efforts. They would pay employees. They're paying employees to spend one day a week on something for the greater good of some sort. And it could have been an independent project with some sort of positive outcome like that, or it could have been just something interesting that somebody wanted to spend some time on. There are countless examples that get turned into products. There was one project, I knew the person that worked on it, called All for Good. I doubt very much it could still be around. Okay, I paused there for a moment and checked it out. So All for Good was a Google 20% project. Again, I haven't talked to the guy, so I couldn't even say I know him, but at the time I knew who he was. I talked to him. All for Good, it was a volunteer sort of awareness platform. So you could say, hey, we have a volunteer project here. at a particular location, and then you could search like what kind of volunteer opportunities are there around me. So definitely a community elevation effort, right? So the 20% project eventually got spun off, and now it is available. If you were to search, as I did, for All for Good, 3 words, All for Good, and then I think I put Google in there too. So All for Good, Google, you will get some of the backstory and some things that don't sound exactly completely accurate, but the general idea. It was spun off and is now part of the pointsoflight.org effort. There's a subdomain, so engage.pointsoflight.org. Kind of looks like, well, I think you can search. Okay, so the user interface is slightly different, but so the idea was you could have basically a map that showed, I'm in this area, here are some things going on over the next 30 days or whatever it was. So whatever form it's in now, this is basically an example of civic innovation, right? This didn't exist before. You look around and say, how can I make where I live better? How can I help people around me? How can I connect people around me with other people who need some volunteer time and so on? As a civic volunteer organization ourselves, that's completely relevant. So these, paying employees to spend 1 day a week on something for the greater good seems like an interesting idea. I'm laughing because when I read about this, the 20% idea has evolved. That's the language that they use. So that's what I found humorous. The 20% program has evolved or turned into something that is not on such solid footing. So it's no longer like a universal program generally available. It depends on what you're working on and who you're working for and how it could fit in. And sometimes the project is actually just working on some internal tools. So like take some time to spend on this tangentially related thing. The old school 20%, possibly community facing, uplifting efforts can be found. You have to look. So I don't know if other companies enable such efforts with pay. It's a great question. I do know that it's not necessarily internal, and not everything is software development, obviously. So there are companies here in the greater Vegas area, I'm sure there are elsewhere, where their employees will spend some time, I don't know if it's monthly or whatever, they'll go out and volunteer for local organizations, little projects and so on. And it's considered part of their workday. Some attorneys will do pro bono work as a matter of community outreach and being good citizens and so on. So it depends on exactly what you do and who you work for and so on. But I think this is not uncommon. It's just not very common. Or maybe it is. So the idea then was to shine a light on local innovation and local innovators, mostly on those who are aiming their innovative efforts back towards home, back towards the neighborhood and the communities and so on. This is part of our standard operating procedure within the foundation here, where civic volunteers in our cohort are always recognized with full attribution unless they opt out. But with CityCamp and Smarter Smart City Challenge, as 2 examples, there could be more after, you never know. There is no suggestion that participants must be associated with our foundation and its initiatives and projects in any way other than through our facilitating and fiscally sponsoring these events. So they're free to work on anything they like. And so in other words, the gates should and must be thrown open for those who wish to try ideas in our global innovation hub. And would it not be useful if there was some way, pardon me, I had just finished all my water. Wouldn't it be good if there was some way to engage with others and a little bit of co-creation in there where it can work, whether with local members of our physical geographical communities or with our huge population of annual visitors, or both? So you essentially say, you don't have to join our organization or you don't have to join anything, but you can participate in this organized CityCamp event or collection of events over the course of 2027 in the Smarter Smart City Challenge, which basically comes down to, do you see something around you that you think could be done better, could be fixed, could be implemented at all? Maybe it doesn't exist yet. Does it have to be software? Absolutely not. Could it be just a description of what you'd like to see? Absolutely. Maybe you build a presentation that you can make to our city council or to the county commission. So it's really just describing your idea, and we need to basically foster an environment where that's going to connect. So getting more people involved, getting people to go from somebody should fix that to, hey, I have an idea. I should tell people about it. And then you can talk to others, get some feedback. So over the course of the year, I have mentioned while I was working for Intel Corporation, we had a reality TV show. You should be, oh, really? Is this a thing? Absolutely. Every company should do one. So we had a reality TV show called America's Greatest Makers. It really turned into America's Greatest Entrepreneurs. They were really trying to push all the teams into how would you turn this into a business so we can sell you chips. But the idea started as America's Greatest Makers. It was turning your hobby into your hobby or interest area into a concern, potentially commercial concern. But in the process of doing this, we had someone from Berkeley Haas Business College, I guess, come out and work with the teams. This is how you knew it was an entrepreneur. They didn't have Dale Doherty come out from Make Media, the founder of the Maker Faire, co-founder probably. They had someone from a business college from Berkeley, across the bay, come out to San Francisco where we were doing production in a makerspace and talk about things like pivots and engaging your customers, sort of a co-creation model. And part of the process during I think it was like 3 weeks that we were there for that part of the production, they wanted you to go out into the city, go wander on the sidewalks. That's may or may not be so safe today, but this was around 2015 or something. Go out and talk to people, tell them your idea, get their feedback, and see what they think. So that was the idea. Obviously, and the show went off, and then that was the only one. Then they laid everybody off, and they got rid of the Maker Innovator program at Intel, and that's where they are today. Obviously, participation in one or both of these upcoming unconference adventures is essential for a few reasons. One, participation in a hackathon or something similar in duration, such as CityCamp, a CityCamp event, is a great way to discover whether innovation is for you in a short period of time. Not that this is like the universal test, but it should whet the appetite, so to speak. WHET. At the same time, executing these events with participation beyond a dozen or so is essential to boost these notions in general into local consciousness. If a dozen people show up, oh, okay. If 100 people show up, you might get some attention. If 1,000 people show up, you might need more space. If a dozen people show up, it is likely they will have missed the announcement that the events were canceled for lack of interest. CityCamp really needs to be about 100 people. The Smarter Smart City Challenge over the course of the year should have at least 1,500, closer maybe to 2,000, maybe even 2,500 people for the first year, the first time doing this. If you think, well, that's a lot of people. There are 2.4 million people in the Clark County / Greater Vegas area. 2,500 is 0%. If we are a global innovation hub, we should be able to get to 0%. This, where are we? General awareness that these are taking place in September, the final date to be determined, and through all of 2027, obviously, you know which one is which I'm referring to, will be helpful if someone is actually interested in taking part on the other side, so to speak, to be a part of a co-creation engagement, to try out some ideas and provide feedback during the participants' development process. So somebody who's walking along the streets of Vegas instead of San Francisco, and someone might come up to you and say, hey, what do you think of this idea that I have? What would you do differently? What would you try it? Would you be a tester? You want to learn more about it as we develop? And that'll be more fun, I think, for everybody over the course of the full year, if we can get people engaged and excited about doing this. So I think this will be an adventure in determining whether this is a global innovation hub or not. This episode was, I jumped ahead 2 sentences. This may not be for everyone, but I could be completely wrong, and this might be for everyone. It's intended to be for everyone. Yet more reason to have some conversations, not only with pre-planners, but with actual participants and potential co-creation collaborators at large. So this episode was recorded on June 2nd, 2026, as we said at the top of the show. And so from that perspective, the thing that comes next is a non-empty RSVP list for our online pre-planning meetups for the upcoming CityCamp Las Vegas 2026 unconference. And then the much more broad and challenging Smarter Smart City Challenge. Hey, challenging challenge. Yes, the challenge is challenging. If it fills the volume of interesting space it could fill, that is, an empty room will not be, well, let's not talk about that yet. So we need to have some people interested in making this happen other than just me. So that will be the interesting challenge moving forward, is to get people to show up. In Vegas, that is essentially impossible, but that's what innovation is, getting around and over and under the impossible. So there we go. The thing that comes next is you to a pre-planning meetup. Big things have small beginnings. The longest journey begins with a single step, and our unconferences begin with your participation at pre-planning meetups. They've been on Wednesdays, although they've not really happened because nobody expresses any interest whatsoever. So we have a lot of people following the Smart City Vegas page on LinkedIn. We have people subscribing to the newly published newsletter, which will come out Thursdays each week. So the inaugural issue has come out. There's also issues of the Innovation for Vegas news. The LinkedIn universe is, despite being full of people, is not totally applicable to what we're trying to accomplish. So a lot of this stuff will move into external newsletter type emailings, as part of a general need to reach out to people so that they know that these things are happening. The greater Vegas area is not very good at doing that when it comes to something other than resort demolition or elements of the fun economy. That is a trademark term. The trademark is held by the Office of Economic Development at UNLV. It was granted in February of 2025. So if we're not doing something directly tied to the fun economy or crime and politics or real estate, the odds of us becoming discovered in our local media, they're very small. So that might be an entire topic area to look at. How do we make our smart city smarter by having more information available to the people who live here? Just a thought. We can also make our transit system better, and the list continues. You kind of have to show up to get the ball rolling, and that's where we are. That is it. We've come to the end of the episode. I got about 40 minutes on my clock here, so not too bad. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Hopefully it was informative, and hopefully I will hear from you or see you at the next meeting. We were having them on the first Wednesdays of the month, but as time is slipping away until September, we have to pick a final date, right? We haven't even done that because more than one person might be involved in this. We'd like to involve students. We'd like to involve a venue. So we need to have some people who are willing to chime in on some pluses and minuses of particular dates, how that might fit into a school curriculum. We'd love to have teachers invite their students to participate, maybe as a classroom activity. We're talking CityCamp so far, but then once we get into the Smarter Smart City Challenge, there's a ton of possibility. And we will have learned some things from the CityCamp Las Vegas 2026 in September. And here's a fun fact. Smarter Smart City Challenge all through the year could include a CityCamp Las Vegas 2027, maybe once again in September. So we're going to see how all this unfolds, but it does start with having more than one person, me, show up at our online planning meetups to discuss. And I hope that will take place over the summer. We're going to have more than meetings on the first Wednesdays, or it will be 2028 before anybody shows up to anything. That's where I'm going to leave it for today. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for so much for thinking about supporting what we're trying to accomplish in some way. And we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.